Hi everyone and welcome. We're out here in my garden today because we're going to finally get to work on something that I've been promising myself for some time now, which is the build of my outdoor composting bin, vermicomposting bin. So what I'm going to be doing is taking some of the worms from my wormery downstairs, and I'll finally be launching this outdoor worm bin that I've been telling myself I want to do for the longest time. The container I've chosen to do this in is the brown container you see right behind me. The brown container is actually in use right now. So what I need to do before I can set it up for vermicomposting is I need to empty it. And I've actually considered just taking it the way it is and placing worms into it, but let me bring you a little bit closer. If you look here, you'll see that it's already almost at capacity. It's pretty full, and it just seems like a bit much in terms of using it to start a worm bin with. I mean, it would take forever for the worms to eat that. And my thought on this was to really empty it out and start from scratch and lay in at first some bedding materials. And that's why I've taken a whole bunch of cardboard, what you see here, so that I can lay that down on the bottom. And then what I was going to do was I was going to pick through some of this and try to pick out some of the food items or some of the items in here that could be used as food for the worms, and as well as some of the stuff that I might be able to use as sort of a bedding type material. So I was really hoping to utilize a whole bunch of the stuff that's already here available to me, but just not all of it. And that's the reason I've got this other bin right here, is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to use that going forward as my kind of as my kitchen waste, garden waste, composting bin. And then from this point on, I'm just going to use this one as my outdoor vermicomposting bin. So after I've taken the cardboard and I've laid it in as sort of a lower bottom layer and added some food items, I'll be able to go back and I'll be able to use some of this stuff here, a whole bunch of dry leaves, to top off the material. And then I've got these cardboard lids that I've created as a top to put on them. So I'm going to get to work on picking through this container to try to cherry pick the stuff that I want to use as food and maybe as some bedding, and get it empty so we can start setting it up as my new outdoor vermicomposting bin. Alright, so this is pretty interesting. I started into here thinking that I might be using some of the material in here as food for my new worm bin, but as soon as I dug into here, I started noticing some sort of larvae. I'm not sure what these are, but these little guys, I can see them crawling all over the coffee grinds that are in here. And I guess they're burrowing down at this point because I must have alarmed them. But I really didn't want to have like all kinds of different weird things in here. My idea here was to only have worms in my bin. So I'm starting to second guess whether I really want to follow through with this original game plan of using material from this bin. Because if this material is already occupied with some other sort of worms, such as these larvae of whatever they might be, then they can have it. They can just continue to work this material down and have it for themselves. But I don't want to I really don't want to commingle anything other than my composting worms into this bin. So I'm going to switch gears here a little bit, and what I'm going to do now is I'm simply going to take all the material from this bin, and I'm going to and you can see down here too, we've got ants. We've got a whole slew of different types of creatures occupying this bin and making use of the bounty of different food items that are already well underway composting in here. So I guess as we dig down, we can see a whole lot more of these little guys. You can see them everywhere, and they're doing a pretty good job, it seems. I mean, you don't go very far down, and you can already see what a great job they're doing breaking this food down. And you can see they're really enjoying this corn. Wow. I'm not sure what these are. If anyone out there recognizes what types of insect this is, then, by all means chime in. I'm curious to know what these are. So I guess I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to empty this bin, move it over into the move the contents over into that other container, give it a rinse, and then we'll start setting up as our worm bin. So you could see as we start to make our way to the bottom of this material here, there's still a lot of corn cobs, tons of corn cobs, because we're kind of in the tail end of corn season now. In addition to some of these larger distinguishable food items such as corn cobs, there is just a whole bunch of really muddy material down here. This is all completely composted material, and I did tell myself I'm just going to move it all over wholesale, right over into the other container, and I'm going to do exactly that. But the one thing I'm doing while I'm moving everything over is I'm adding in here and there, throwing in some dry leaves in between the layers, since it is rather moist and damp, and since most of the stuff that comes out of the kitchen and out of garden waste and everything is mostly nitrogen rich green type material, as you would refer to it in the composting world, I want to also commingle some browns, which is the dry material such as the dry leaves, to really give this material a chance to fully break down, because the very rich nitrogen green material is just going to become muddy like this if you don't add some browns to it. So I think by doing this, by layering in these dry leaves and then continuing to bring over the material from that other bin, we're probably going to end up in a very short period of time, maybe in the next couple months, some really beautiful compost over here. So yeah, just wanted to give you a quick peek to see how this is coming along and to see what it looks like at the very bottom. And then over here I've just been separating some of the larger stuff that I'm just going to lay on the top, since it's more freshly loaded materials. Alright, let's get this thing empty. All we have left then is this couple handfuls of material remaining in here that we can place over into the other container. Then we can start getting this thing rinsed out and ready for building it as a vermicomposting bin. Okay, so now that we've moved all of the material out of the brown bin into this bin, I guess we can just drop in these few items that I had set aside, which were the types of materials that were really kind of hovering on the top surface of the container previously, and because it's just more fresh type stuff that needs a little bit more time to break down. Then I'm going to just go ahead and put it back where the other one was. And this will just continue to be our kind of kitchen waste overflow bin, as well as the place I put all my cuttings from the trimming the garden and pruning and stuff like that. So this was a little bit of a detour from what I had originally planned on covering, but it seemed interesting enough to get into it a little bit. So let's get back to setting up the outdoor vermicompost bin. Okay, so now that we've got all that taken care of, we're on to the assembly of the bin. So the bin is all nice and clean, as you can see. But I've put a couple other items out here just to show you what my idea here was. Number one was that I didn't want to have this resting directly on the ground. So it's the reason I've got this piece of wood here. This was part of some sort of a piece of furniture or something. It had a hinged piece. The hinged piece is right there. And I don't know, it had some sort of a cushion on it, maybe some sort of legs or something. I don't remember. But I'd always thought that these might come in handy at some point. And I think I finally found a good reason to have hung on to them. So my idea here was to have this thing resting up off the ground like so, and then rather than just having the lid directly on top of the container like so, I was just concerned that it would just become a little bit too stuffy in there for them. I thought that this other segment would be a good topper for the container as well. So it's kind of almost the right size, and it's got a pretty good size lip on it underneath here. Actually, the way I was actually thinking of it was the other way, this way, like so. And then this pretty deep lip over here would be hopefully enough to keep this lid from getting blown away or sliding off. And even if it moves around a little bit within this space, it should still pretty much keep the container covered for the most part, but still also allowing some good airflow to get into the container to keep things ventilated. So this is kind of what I envisioned as my outdoor worm bin, and now it's really just a matter of laying in the materials so that we can get it ready for populating it with the worms. So in addition to the carbon-based materials, the leaves and the cardboard newspaper mix that we have here, we've also got some other materials down here, which is the actual food. So we have a melon here, which kind of went bad, and we've got some other things here, kind of a mixture of different stuff. There's an eggplant in there, some strawberries, some cucumber shavings and whatnot, different types of fruits and veggies all mixed in together. Those are going to become the food items. And then last but not least, we've got a little bit of grit over here, which is just pulverized eggshell. So we're just going to assemble this bin the same way we normally assemble any bin. Laying down some bedding material on the bottom, laying some foods, and then just pile some other stuff on top just to keep the pests out. So why don't we get to work? We'll begin with this mix of newspaper and cardboard, and I'm just going to loosely drop some of that down onto the bottom of the container. So I don't really want to use too much. I think this is almost enough actually. So yeah, why don't we leave it at that? Now, before we add the food, I figured I'd also throw a little bit of leaf down there as well. So we'll just sprinkle some dry leaves down there on top of the cardboard. Okay. I think that should make for a pretty cozy kind of a bedding material for them. Now for now I'm not going to add any moisture. I'm going to go ahead and leave it as is, because I think that the frozen food items, so basically this combination of different types of veggies and fruits, as well as this melon right here, which was also in the freezer and given a chance to freeze overnight before giving it to the worms. I believe that this is going to make for a pretty nice mix for the worms to begin with. That's a pretty good helping of food. I'm not going to be adding too many worms to begin with. I think it's only a couple hundred. It's going to be maybe a couple hundred red wigglers combined with a couple hundred European night crawlers. At some point in the near future I might also add some African night crawlers. But for now I just didn't want to overload this bin with stuff because the amount of worms I'm adding to this is limited. So now on top of this, I'm simply going to add more leaf material. Okay, looks good. Okay, so now the only other main ingredient is the grit. So I'm just going to sprinkle some of this eggshell throughout, taking care not to breathe any of this dust because evidently it's not healthy to breathe this stuff in. So I'm glad there's a good breeze blowing here. But I was basically holding my breath while that was happening. So the last thing I wanted to do, and I didn't want to go overboard on this, but I also wanted to sprinkle in a little bit of water just to dampen the upper surface of the material, get these leaves on top a little bit moist. I don't mind having the materials at the bottom a little bit dry so that they can actually absorb some of the moisture as those fruits and veggies that we throw in there, that frozen stuff, begins to thaw out and starts to kick out moisture on its own. So now once the worms go in here, and prior to putting on this lid, I've created these couple of cardboard tops to sort of rest right on top of the material to sort of help keep the moisture down and prevent the material from drying out excessively. But for now I'm not going to put this stuff in. I'm going to wait until the worms have actually been loaded, and then I'll be able to put on these cardboard lids and put on the top that I have over here. So that's pretty much where I stand, with the exception of having the worms. But for now that's it. once we got the worms ready to load in here, I'll probably shoot another short video. It'll probably be a video associated with me obtaining those worms from the container that they're in right now, and then I'll just probably include a short segment in that video just launching them into here. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to position this over by the side of the house, which is where I intend to keep it from now on. And that's it for today. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up. I always really appreciate that. And I'll also consider signing up to be a subscriber to the channel. That's always appreciated as well. Alright everyone, have a great day. Bye now.